Happy holidays and welcome to another edition of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you're used to. And I'm not wearing the clothes that you're used to me wearing because it's the holiday season. It's the end of the year special, which is the end of all things ridiculous and nuts and crazy. And I thought that 2016 was ridiculous and crazy with the Cubs winning the World Series and everything else. And 2020 basically said, hold my beer. Now, two people that you always want to catch up to, regardless, especially as they're recapping the year that was, are these two wonderful people that I always enjoy catching up to. First, the rock star on the far left, of course, the lady of the group, Kira Davis. Need I say more other than her name? Kira, happy holidays, and say something nice about the gentleman that you're on the show with today.
Merry Christmas. You look very nice in your casual Friday outfit.
Thank you so much. You know it's the holiday season, and I must have asked Santa for this because the next time you tune in, we're back to normal. Now,
this may be the first time I've seen you without a suit jacket, Lenny, in all the years I've known you.
Well, you know, let's just be honest. My wife's been married to me for 18 years, and she's only seen me without them maybe twice, and we won't even start... You know where that's going. We're going to be good on this show. Won't mention anyhow. That dude, something on his head. Kind of a hat, kind of not really. He's trying to be festive, but he's also trying to be cool. Jeff Charles, Heart of Texas. Happy holidays to you, sir. Say something nice about Kira because she deserves it.
Well, first off, I don't have to try to be cool. It's naturally. I would have to try to not be cool.
Right. Right.
Wow.
But Kira, I mean, there's never. It's impossible to say anything negative about Kira Davis because if it did, it's like you would blow up if you did because it would just be so ridiculous. Like you
agree. I agree. I wish somebody would tell my husband and kids that. I'm still waiting for them all to blow up.
Yeah. I wasn't going to say that. I was going to talk about the far left in the United States of America. Tell them there's nothing negative that you can say about Kira Davis. And by the way, you're not that cool because I just learned that you have teenagers. And once you have at least one teenager, Dad, stop being
That's
cool
it.
for 10 years.
You are not cool. No more cool.
I'm cool to everybody else except my kids.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the thing. Like, you'll always be humble if you have children. Like, they will never be impressed. I go on shows where there are 18 million viewers, and my kids have yet to be impressed with a darn thing that I've done. Nothing.
Well, hold on, wait a minute. Before we get into like year-end stuff, Kira, we bring you on this show because you make us look good and you build us up. But then you name drop like, oh, you know, I've been on shows with 18 million viewers and this is that and the other. And I come on here once a week with the low lights of the social media world. And because I like to slum with the people that are up and coming. I was really feeling good about myself. I wore my Christmas gift. And there you go to remind me that I'm not really relevant when it comes to all these things. We have
like about 20 million viewers, don't we, Lenny? I thought I was.
Yeah, that's true. No,
I think we're like hovering around 20 million.
Yeah, well, you have 19.5 million. Jeff has 499,996, and I have people whose last name is McAllister that watch the show. And so you're right. With that said, 2020. This has been one of the most, I don't know, is there anything that we should try to talk about in this year? Because it's these year-end shows, with years like this, it gets a little difficult. Kira.
It's so crazy. I know. I was thinking earlier, like, okay, year-end wrap for 2020. And there's two parts to 2020, right? There's like the first half, which was kind of crazy any year with Trump is crazy. It was an election cycle. And then some bigger things happened, like Kobe Bryant died. I mean, you guys remember that? Kobe Bryant died this year. Kobe Bryant. And it's like the least shocking thing that's happened this year. I didn't even know where to start. And I'm almost like, I'm a little bit leery of even making too big of a deal out of it because I don't want to jinx 2021. Like, I need 2021 to at least even out. This is so weird because when I had my son, I remember figuring out, oh, he's going to graduate in 2020. He's going to be class of 2020. You know, when we were kids, like, ooh, 2020, that's going to be the future. We're going to be on moving sidewalks and flying cars, and it's going to be the Jetsons. We had these big grand visions of what 2020 was going to be. And I was so excited that my kid was going to be graduating that year. It's just so crazy that this has turned out to be the worst year imaginable, and it's still going on. I don't even know where to start.
I mean, honestly, Kobe Bryant died in January of 2020. And that in some years would be one of the biggest stories of the year. And it's like,
I totally forgot.
Yes.
I was hosting radio the other day, and a caller called. We were talking about 2020, and a caller called, and he's like, you know, Kobe Bryant died this year, right? And I was like, oh my gosh. To me, that was like 4 years ago already. Not to make light of that, I know it's very real for his family, but just to say, like, so much has happened since then. It blew my mind to think about.
Well, and Jeff, to Kira's point, Kira didn't age this year, but most of the rest of the country, you like how I did that, right? Most of the rest of the country, we feel like we've gone through 10 years. It doesn't necessarily mean that you wear it on your face or you wear it on how much weight you may have gained or lost or whatever, but we've been through a decade. You know, I've spent the year saying we went through 1918, World War II with the Great Depression, and 1968 in basically 9 to 10 months. And there's an impact for that. You know, when you look back on 2020, Jeff, how do you initially look at all this?
Yeah, I mean, the year was unprecedented, right? I mean, before 2020, we were expecting this year to be about the presidential election, the other elections, things like that. And we knew that it was going to be a hot political year. But then COVID happened. And that just, not only did that change people's lives, their day-to-day lives, it ratcheted up the political tension even more than we even thought possible. So not only are we dealing with having to stay home and having to deal with shutdown orders and whether or not we should be wearing a mask or whether they should mandate us wearing a mask, we're dealing with massive small business closures because of the lockdown orders. Not only that, but we're having to argue about all of these things on top of Trump, who already makes politics spicy, I'll say. And you know, of course, and then we already have our activist media, whose goal was to make us as afraid as possible and to basically push their political agenda as well. And that only, what I just said is just basically the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more than that under the surface. I mean, we've got Kobe dying, Eddie Van Halen, and we've got so much other stuff that has happened this year. So that when people say things like 2020 sucks, I mean, you can't really compare it to any other year. 2020 is uniquely crappy, and we can only hope that 2021. We can only hope that 2020 doesn't seep over into 2021. We need to leave 2020 where it's at and hope things that get better in 2021 and going forward.
Now, the only thing that we didn't get in 2020 that you may have gotten in like a 1968 or other big unprecedented years is the fact that, praise God, there were no political assassinations, at least not physical assassinations. We have plenty of reputation assassinations. But other than that, we did see an awful lot of violence in 2020. We saw a lot of protest over the last several years, but the level of violence that we're seeing, you know, some of the protests we saw here in Pittsburgh where the protester picked up the beer and drank it and slammed it on the ground, and people getting pushed and shoved around in the back and forth with police. You saw that this year in a way that you just didn't see it in previous years, Kira. You know, part of that, I guess, you know, to Jeff's point, it's the amalgamation of everything. I mean, COVID shutdown was real. People not getting jobs was real. Think about it. The massive amount of unemployment, we still kind of talk about it now, but think about how mind-blowing it was in March. That seems like that was 4 or 5 years ago for some of us. Not for all of us, but to the media, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we were already a powder keg. First of all, let's not forget what's led up to 2020. 4 years of nonstop prosecuting of Trump in the media and using the federal system. It was just a massive waste of our time, but it did nothing but gin up bitterness and hatred. And I mean, the media, this is absolutely the media's fault. And they were in collusion with the Democrat Party to create this type of division. I believe it. But it is indicative of what was happening leading into 2020. We were already so heated, so divided. Now you have COVID, which in the beginning was very scary. I mean, it was very scary, like particularly when we didn't have any clue about what it was. Like as far as we knew in March, you could catch COVID just walking down the street, and 50% of the population was predicted to just drop dead where they stand. I mean, it was freaking scary. And as things as we got to know more about the disease and got more facts and information, you add that to people already locked in their houses, already losing their business, already losing their jobs. So people came into it irritated. Now they've had every pillar stripped away from them, every bit of their foundation. Can't go to church, can't go visit your mama and papa, can't go hang out with your girlfriends or your guy friends that are your biggest support. And then on top of that, we heap on that the already tense racial situation that has always been bubbling up and down in this country at certain times. It was just a powder keg. It needed a match. In my opinion, the Democrats were all too happy to provide the gasoline and the matches this year. It was bound to explode. And I really don't think we're finished blowing up yet. I think one side might be finished yet, but this country hasn't yet seen a violent reaction from the right yet. And this country hasn't seen like real angst from the right yet. We talk a lot, but most of us had jobs. First of all, we're not the type of people that are going to take the streets and blow up businesses. We own the businesses, but and I'm not sure what form it'll come in, but I don't think we're done seeing an explosion of temper in this country, particularly when now we're moving into 2021. Our politicians have lied to us. 30 days to slow the spread. My ass, now we're going in 300 days and people are losing everything. People are quite upset. I think we're in for some more trouble.
It's interesting because let's pivot a little bit, because part of what we found a lot of this year was political unrest from places you didn't expect it and towards targets you didn't expect. For example, this guy right here, he's one of several different politicians. I know this is, I'm not, I promised Mr. Davis, he made me sign a cease and desist in regards to those jokes going in the next year. So we're good. But with that said, this is one of the politicians that literally do as I say, not as I do. Whether it's governors, going to parties without masks, whether it's county executives in Erie County, Pennsylvania, going across state borders after shutting everybody down in Erie County, whether it's the mayor of Denver saying nobody traveled during Thanksgiving and then getting on a plane from Denver to Houston to then get in a rent-a-car to drive to Mississippi. Whatever the case may be, the Secretary of Health here in Pennsylvania, let's take COVID patients, put them back in the nursing homes, but I'm going to take my mother and put her in a hotel because heaven forbid, don't want to get her sick. It seems like we've had all these constant back and forth and these contradictions, Jeff, including, and I'll bring up Governor Cuomo eventually, where you literally have governors, Jeff, telling us what's a meal. 5 wings is a meal. 3 wings is not. A peanut butter and jelly sandwich with a beer is kind of like an appetizer. But if you have 3 sandwiches and a beer and 2 wings, that's a meal, and thus you can go to a restaurant. That type of foolishness we saw, and that was 6 months ago, and that seemed like 18 months ago.
The statists on the left have had a field day with this. And what's amazing, Lenny, is that every incident of hypocrisy that you just listed off, it doesn't even cover all of it. It doesn't even cover half of the Democratic politicians who have engaged in brazen hypocrisy on these shutdown orders. And what's amazing is that they don't even try to hide it. They don't even try to hide their hypocrisy. They don't even try to be slick with it. They give like a little BS apology after they get busted, and they go right back and do it again. They don't give a crap because The activist media doesn't give a crap. They won't hold them accountable. I think like maybe Trevor Noah said some stuff about it. But other than him, nobody is really calling out the hypocrisy. And it's amazing because they'll call out Republican politicians or Republican or conservative demonstrators at rallies and say, oh, they're not wearing masks. Okay, well, they're not the ones who've been preaching about it. So if you're going to be mad at them, how do you let these other people out the hook? Maybe you don't actually take any of this crap seriously at all. And maybe you're only talking about this because it's politically expedient. And maybe that's why nobody trusts your trifling little you know what anymore.
Jeff, it's the holiday season. Your holiday jingle.
No,
Merry Christmas.
we're mad. We can't bring it down.
That feels good.
It's time. We're done bringing it down. It's time to bring it up. I'll tell you guys what. This is Kira's New Year's resolution.
Uh-oh.
Like, I'm no longer looking for middle ground here. There is none to be had, although I pride myself in looking for middle ground. But at some point, foolishness must be answered. There's a verse in Proverbs that seems contradictory, but it says, you don't argue with a fool, lest other people think you're the fool too. But in the very next verse, it says the fool must be answered, lest he thinks he's a wise man. All that is discernment. I have discerned that foolishness is starting to take center stage in this debate, as I believe led by progressive millennials. I think this is a real problem that we're experiencing right now. And foolishness needs to be answered by those of us who are old enough and wise enough to know what we're talking about and know what we're doing. And so I'm no longer happy to just kind of sit by and just laugh at these people. I think we need to ridicule these people, but we also need to be willing to step up and point out the illogic of their arguments. So Jeff made a wonderful argument on this show a few weeks ago, one of the last times we met, about how, there's only, if you're using your brain and reason, there's only two logical conclusions to come to here. Jeff said, your politicians know that this virus is very dangerous and don't care. They don't care that they're killing your granny when they go out to eat at the French Laundry. They don't care when they're going to the hairdresser without masks. They don't care about you or your granny. Or they know that what they're saying is BS. They know that there's nothing to be worried about, not in the capacity that would require us to shut down our entire society. I think it's the latter, and I think that the media believes that too. None of these people have stopped doing their stuff. You mean to tell me, do you really believe? Listen, I'm in South California, where this is La La Land. Everybody knows somebody in the business here. I can tell you for sure, these celebrities have not stopped having their parties. They've not stopped meeting. They're all pontificating on social media, but they're all having parties. Our politicians have all gone out. Look at the mayor of Austin, who had the nerve to make a video telling his people in Austin to stay home, to stay safe from Mexico. I mean, it's time. We cannot take these people seriously anymore. And matter of fact, today, on the day we're recording this, Governor Newsom came out and said he's issuing another 3 weeks of hardcore stay-at-home orders, lockdowns for Southern California. And I think the amount of people that are actually listening to him is exactly zero. I mean, I didn't even have the wherewithal to get angry, because I'm not going to listen to it. Nobody is. I was hitting traffic on Christmas, y'all. Folks are out and about.
So 2 things. Number one, if I wanted to go to a place, watch this, Jeff. If I wanted to go to a place where I would go through an exercise where I would work an idea to its most logical conclusion, Kira, where might I go to do that, or have somebody walk me through that, if you will?
We might want to try a little podcast called Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis, which also coincidentally happens to be my name. Just Listen to Yourself is available wherever you find your podcasts. And on that podcast, I do talk a lot about, because here's the thing, and this is what we do, Lenny. We like, this is why I like our show too, because we're not happy to stop at the talking points. It's what you do in your day job, Lenny, with charter schools, because a lot of people come at you with talking points and they sound really good coming out of your mouth, right? They sound, oh, burn, that's a sick burn, and no one's ever really thinking about the logic behind it. I don't understand how you can look at Gavin Newsom and he is out doing whatever the hell he wants. How you can look at him as a progressive leftist and the most you can say is, oh, he's not a very good example. You don't want to think any harder about that. You don't want to dig any deeper into that. He's not a very good example. Maybe everything he's saying is bull.
So,
the question is, why is he a bad example? Don't say, oh yeah, he's a bad example. No, you're right. You got to dig deeper on that. Why is he not? Is he not adhering to the orders that he's been preaching? If it happened just like once, then okay, no. It's been more than once. It's been more than twice. And if that's just if that's just what we saw on TV, how much more is he actually doing it when we don't see it? So yeah, don't just say, oh, he's just being irresponsible. No. There's a reason why. Dig. It's not, you don't have to dig that hard. It's easy to figure out. He doesn't believe what he's saying.
And I'm gonna say something that's gonna be a little controversial, but I'm gonna throw it out there to both of you. A lot of people, and I'll get to the media in just a second. A lot of people want to say that Donald Trump is responsible for a certain amount of people dying of COVID because of the actions of the administration. But there's an argument to be made that if you trust your governor in New York, you trust your governor in California, you trust your mayor in name a city, and you see this level of hypocrisy, you don't trust them either. And maybe people are less inclined to follow the orders, particularly over the second half of 2020, than they were in March and April, because of the point that Kira brought up earlier, which was this was initially supposed to flatten the curve. Now it has, in some instances, people are just, they're scared. They want to save every single possible life versus saying, what's the balance? I only want to listen to healthcare professionals, not people in the economy, and educators and healthcare professionals and, firefighters and police officers, and let's make a balanced decision. And because there's a level of hypocrisy from a little bit of everywhere, that there are more and more Americans saying enough's enough. I'm going to travel for Christmas. I'm getting on an airplane. I'm doing this, that, and the other. And there's a lot of blame perhaps to go around. I'll start with you, Kira, and then I'll go to Jeff.
I have never quite understood the blame for President Trump. I would say, if anything, President Trump is to blame for the lockdown mess we're in. He never should have acquiesced to that one. But I can understand in the beginning when no one knew what was going on, and he probably didn't either, And so if you got all these people in your ear saying, look, if you don't suggest that we lock down the economy, you could have 1 to 2 million dead Americans on your hands in the next 4 months. That's a pretty hefty decision. I think that was his mistake, but I know he sounds like a broken record, and to some people he sounds crazy. I don't think Trump is crazy. I think Washington, D.C. is crazy, and he's reacting to it. So yeah, he sounds crazy. But I think what he was saying the whole time, that the cure can't be worse than the disease. I don't think it's not up to the president to save every American life. It's not even up to the president to protect us from illness. I don't think he's the person to blame here. We are a federalist system. We are a republic, and every state gets to make these decisions for themselves. It's not Trump's fault that all those people in nursing homes have died. That is Governor Cuomo's fault. And that is the fault of the nursing home commissions in New York State. So could more lives be saved? This is not our position to decide. You can't prove a negative. You don't know how many people were going to die if we didn't do X, Y, Z. The only thing you can do is protect our human rights and provide the medical care that we need to care for the vulnerable and the suffering. And we need to let everybody else go about their business. This has been a disaster, but I don't think it's Trump's fault. I think we can blame each individual governor for the messes in their own states. And they all want to be, Newsom wants to be all like, this is California, we're our own nation state, until, he wants the federal government to give him a pacifier, to give him some formula. And then he's like, oh, they're not doing their job. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm sick of everything today.
Well, and your frustration is well articulated, first of all. And second, Jeff, it's interesting because the bully pulpit from the White House is a bully pulpit, It's not the physician pulpit. It's not the priest pulpit. So there's this balance, right, between keeping people safe when you can, seeing it as a national threat as you should, but also there's this constitution to be mindful of. There's individual rights you got to be mindful of. There's federalism that you got to be mindful of. And it's been a very interesting year how people have seen this dance both go well and go not so well, whether it's the local governments with the state, or the local government, the city government with the county with the state with the federal government, and then the international community working together, and all these different back and forths. And Jeff, even with the international community, people forget that the Chinese government lied about a lot of this stuff, and international organizations kind of helped alleviate some of the blame initially because they didn't want a bigger situation from a geopolitical standpoint than what they were already going to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, and the World Health Organization were very complicit in China's lies. They helped them lie about the spread of the coronavirus. And what's really horrible about things domestically, our media was willing to side more with China so that they could attack Trump.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it again. They sided with China so that they could use the virus to attack Trump. They pretended that people are racist for even acknowledging that the virus came from China, calling it the Wuhan virus or Kung flu or China virus. Oh no, that's racist. Okay, y'all weren't saying that when it was Ebola, were you? No. There's just so much here that we would have to do this show for another 3 hours to cover everything.
And guess who's back, Jeff? And also look at who is their new best friend, Russia. Suddenly we like Russia again.
Yeah.
Now that Biden's going to be president or pretend to be the president, suddenly we got people, Amy Klobuchar out there going, hey, Putin accepts the results of the election. So
Right.
Suddenly Russia's our friends again.
Right.
Yeah.
That
ends up being ridiculous. Go ahead, Jeff.
There's nothing that the Democrats say or that the far left says. I won't lump all Democrats in with it, but the activist media, there's nothing that they say that they actually mean. Like when they say that it's Trump's fault, they don't really believe that. They know it's not. Now they're able to convince other people to believe that is true, but they know that it's not all Trump's fault. Did Trump handle it perfectly? No president handles something like this perfectly. All of them make mistakes during pandemics that end up probably getting people killed. But we have a president. We don't have a king. We have governors. They are more responsible for keeping their residents safe. When Hurricane Harvey hit Texas here, you didn't see Abbott blaming it on Trump. Abbott got people together and got it together and got stuff fixed, and Trump backed him up like he's supposed to. The federal government is supposed to back up the states. It's not supposed to take control of everything. So they play on people's ignorance because most people don't know how federalism works because they don't really teach that in schools anymore. There's a reason for that. So I think that what's going to happen, going back to something you said earlier, Lenny, when you were talking about how people are pushing back, they're not really following it. Kira, you mentioned that too. We're going to see more of that because the Democrats are going to keep trying to do lockdown orders. They're not going to stop. Even with the vaccine, even when people are comfortable taking it, they've got their activist media friends already writing, oh, you still got to wear masks. We still got to lock down, even with the vaccine. No, this is going to come to a head next year. And it's not going to be from the Republican Party. It's going to be from people who just get sick of this, you know what. And I think it's going to be California that leads the way on that.
So let me ask this question because there you go. Let me ask this. There's been several different big revelations that have come about in 2020. I think one of them, if it wasn't obvious to people before, it should be painfully obvious now, which is there's no real middle in the media. Jeff, you keep saying activist media, and I would like to say, well, the media is in between. Not anymore. You're either Fox News newscast or your MSNBC, and CNN used to be in the middle. When I used to do CNN, which that 10 years ago seems like 100 years ago, CNN used to be the ones in the middle. They don't even try to pretend anymore. So you end up, my opinion, Mr. and Mrs. CNN, is that you have one side over here, one side over there, and the American people who are clamoring for truth, clamoring for something stable to cling to, when it comes to looking for information, simply there is no middle ground anymore. But aside from that, Kira, what else has been the big revelation, do you think, to Americans that maybe you and I and the three of us kind of got for years, but now going through 2020, it's hit them right upside the head like a 2x4?
I think number one, we're kind of seeing the results of federalism and what that means. You know, the left has done their job, and like Jeff suggested, we don't teach it in schools for a reason. I mean, I'm homeschooling my 13-year-old this year, and this is the first time she's learning about federalism. It shocked her to learn that President Trump couldn't just make everybody take a vaccine. It shocked her to learn that President Trump couldn't just order California to shut down, that he had no place doing that, you know? So I think a lot of people are learning a very valuable, tragically late lesson about just what power a president does have and what power your governor has. So we look at DeSantis in Florida and Nome in South Dakota, and we realize they're operating their states very differently than here in California or out there in Pennsylvania. So it's proof positive that federalism works, that this is the way it's supposed to be. And I think the other thing that we've talked about over and over and over again on this show is we are going to see a fundamental shift in education from here on out. And I can't predict exactly what it'll look like. But for instance, there's a lot of major colleges who are now being held to task by parents who otherwise were fine to pay all this money for the elite name of whatever school your kid goes to. Now that the schools are closed, parents are genuinely asking, what exactly am I paying for? You know, when I pay $40,000 to your institution, where exactly does that money go? If my son's getting the same education at home that you say he'd be getting on campus, then what is this money going to? So people are questioning that. We've seen a mass exodus from the public schools, and I've always maintained that if 10% of the American student population left public schools, it would dramatically shift the direction of public schools. And I think we're at about 10% right now. So in the end, we're also seeing how the difference between poor and rich students is widening, right? Because like in my neighborhood here, it's a struggle no matter where you live. Like, let's just be fair about that. It's a struggle no matter what. But my neighbors have the money to pool to hire teachers. They've set up their own micro schools out of their garages. So we're basically doing school in our neighborhood. We're just doing it ourselves like you used to do it in the old days. Poor parents don't have that option. A lot of those kids are just falling right off the grid. So education is going to change a lot. My opinion is for the better, because I think a lot more parents are asking a lot more questions that they weren't asking before. We were kind of coasting. So that's what I see, but it's still going to be a rough ride. And frankly, in my house, Lenny, we've just kind of written 2020 off as far as this year in education. Just get out of the 8th grade and we'll hopefully regroup next year.
And it's been something else. I think another thing maybe perhaps, Jeff, as far as the big revelation to many, many, many Americans is, number one, we always talk about the gig economy like it's a great thing. Well, this is the flip side to the gig economy. If something shuts down and you get a fiat from on high, you don't have work anymore. Number two, everybody thinks that government is the most stable thing around. Remember, everybody wanted a government job. Well, guess what? The government shut down jobs in places such as Pennsylvania, said, we'll pay for your unemployment, then turned around and said, oops, we don't have the money to pay for the unemployment. And by the way, the unemployment system's broken. Don't keep hitting that button because it's not going to work. By the way, if you try to call somebody, no one's going to answer the phone. Number three, the interconnectivity perhaps of the economy, Jeff, where people didn't really realize what a consumer economy means and what a free market economy actually does. It means you can't yank one aspect of the economy and think that everything else is going to work. We found that out the hard way, where when they started picking and choosing winners and losers like they did in Pennsylvania and other states in regards to what industries would shut down, which industries would stay open, you still had millions of people over the course of March and April lose their jobs all at once. We're still about 9 million jobs in the hole as of December. And that's going to take another year, perhaps more, to fill that hole.
You know what? I don't know if people are actually seeing this revelation, but I hope they are. But the revelation that people should be seeing is that the government can't save you. I mean, the government can do a lot, it can do certain things, but at the end of the day, you can't just assume that the government is going to be there for you. And I think what's going to happen is that people are going to miss this lesson because they're just going to say, "Oh, it's because of Trump." I think that's why the Democrats blame Trump so that they can still keep the wool over our eyes. They can still keep the curtain drawn so that people don't see. No, government in general just can't save you all the time. And a lot of the decisions that they make will adversely impact your life, and it's not always a good thing. I mean, those people who don't have jobs, the only thing that they can really blame, they can blame the virus in part, but at the same time, it was the government that shut everything down. And I'm talking about their state governments, their local governments, because like Kira said, President Trump didn't shut anything down. He doesn't have the power to do that. So if anything, this needs to show them how important your state and local governments are, because the president couldn't have really done much just to save you. I mean, maybe you're healthy, but if you don't have a job, that's not Trump's fault. That's your state government's fault and your local government's fault. Because here in Austin, they have certain mandates that Abbott didn't even issue. So it depends on your city, depends on your state, and that's where the focus needs to be. But
that's what's so crazy, you guys. That's what's like driving me nuts is that there are so many people, too many people, who are like, yeah, well, they didn't say this about President Trump personally, but this is what they're saying. They think that the president should be a king. They didn't genuinely do. They really believe that one guy should have the power to just shut down this entire country, force you by the barrel of a gun to stay in your home, force you to wear a piece of cloth over your face, even if you don't want to. That one guy in Washington, D.C. should do that. That's why so many people voted for Biden. That he sold, not him, he didn't sell anything. Biden didn't do anything to win this election. So I'm not going to talk about him.
He did a lot to
Biden
lose it.
He did a lot to lose it. You're absolutely right. But the Biden handlers, that's why they had him out there saying all kinds of stuff. I'll mandate masks. I'll do this. They know he can't do that.
Nor does he want to. Nor does he want to.
Section of a population that really genuinely believe, like when Obama was president, I can remember I think it was John Oliver, the guy with the show on HBO, last week tonight or something. And he said, I just wish Obama could have unlimited dictatorial powers for like 2 months, and then he could just push through everything they wanted to do. And then after that, everyone would see how good it is, that it works for them, and they wouldn't be so upset. This is how these people actually think.
And then what he would do is say, because it's worked so well over these 2 months, I'm going to extend it for another 3 months. By the way, folks, does that sound familiar to you throughout 2020? Yep. That's how that works. So, to me, and it's a revelation that not to go too far and too grandiose with the political philosophy, but there are genuinely some people, and I'll start with you, Jeff. In 2020, they realized they don't want to be as free as they claim they want to be. And I don't care what part of the political spectrum they come from, the Democrats, Republicans, far left, far right, whatever. There are some people that do not want to be as free as they say they want to be. They want somebody to be able to point the finger at, somebody that's going to be a security blanket, someone that's going to tell them they're going to be safe, someone that's going to tell them exactly the risks. I mean, look, if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. I wear a mask. I don't like wearing a mask, but at the same exact time, I'm going to calculate the risks. In a free society, there has to be a balance of that comes about. Now, of course, there's public safety and there's this balance back and forth, but it doesn't seem as though anybody really found the appropriate balance, Jeff, whether it's, Democratic governors in Pennsylvania and New York going a little bit too far on things and on shutdowns and lockdown of jobs and everything else, or you got people that are at, dare I say, super spreader events, as people like to call them. Mm-hmm. Either way, we lost balance. It's as if America doesn't even know what that word is. They know some other B words, but not the balance word.
Yeah, no, they don't. Well, actually, I take that back. I think your regular rank and file person does understand that. They just don't have the microphone. So there are sensible people on the right. There are sensible people on the left about these things. Not everybody on the left is down with the whole mask Nazi thing, and not everybody on the right just thinks that you shouldn't do and take any precautions. But the bottom line is that the free market is going to handle this the best. I mean, we've got to err on the side of freedom. So there might be so there could be businesses like a restaurant that says, hey, if you want to come and risk getting COVID, don't wear a mask. You can come into my establishment. You can make out with everybody in there. And if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, you don't. But then there can be companies who say, hey, if you want to come in here, you got to wear a mask. And then we choose which one we want to go to. It's not that hard. But while the average person might get that, you've got the fringes on both sides being, in my opinion, being dangerous, because they're going to both extremes, and both extremes are usually dangerous, and they get the microphone. They're the ones that the media focuses on. These are the politicians that get the most attention. But the reality is, people have enough common sense to make the decisions for themselves. Like for me, I'm the same way. I take precautions. I'll wear a mask, and I'm not going to go to a place where people are all huddled together with no mask on. I don't want to risk catching it. At the same time, that doesn't mean I have to stay huddled in my home and not go anywhere and do anything unless I have a hazmat suit on.
Yeah, so, wait a minute. Well, hold on. You came on this broadcast with a mask on, and I had to explain to you that it's over the internet, and then you eventually took it off. But I digress.
No, that's because you're just so toxic; it goes right through the.
Wow.
I know. I am that person. Wow. I am such a hypochondriac. Where I had talked to a friend on the internet who had COVID, and I was like, wait, do I have COVID? I'm that person. But I like what Jeff was saying, though, because this is what I'm trying to explain. This is why I've kind of like had it with this conversation. It's really getting on my nerves, because if you just say like, hey, I'm all for precautions, there's no middle ground. There's no in between. If you say, hey, I don't think the government should be telling you whether or not you're allowed to feed your family this week by keeping the doors of your business open, then you're like anti-science and anti-mask. And I'm not an anti-masker. I'm like Lenny, I'll wear the mask if I in a situation where I feel like it would be prudent. We're in this national attitude, as aided by the media, by the way. I think this is a media problem. The problem is that Jeff is absolutely right. There are two extremes, and unfortunately, one extreme rules the media process. So one extreme seems like that's what normal is, and it's not. And Jeff is absolutely right. And thank you for pointing that out and reminding us, Jeff, that a lot of people are in the sensible middle. But we don't need government to make us do what's right. It's not like if government doesn't do it, nobody will do it. I went to see my elderly in-laws this week for Christmas. We're having a surge here in California. They're in Arizona now. We did call and say, do you want us to come? And their response was, absolutely, do not dare stay home. We miss you. We love you. We are not promised tomorrow. We want to hug you and be together in this time that we have. So absolutely come. Did we go out and start making out with strangers on the street? No, we stuck close to home. We wore our masks when we went out. We didn't do hugs or handshakes for that week. We took our own precautions, even though my parents did not ask that of us at all. That's what we thought was the responsible thing to do. We've got a lot of idiots in this country who feel like unless the government tells you to do it, you're not going to do anything right. Those people are dangerous, and they need to be confronted at every opportunity.
So let me ask this question, because we've talked a lot about things that have been obviously COVID-driven, election-driven, media-driven, political-driven, the cultural and the racial tensions and everything else. Has there been anything good that came out of 2020 despite all of this tension? If you looked at 2020, Kara, and you said, okay, it was nuts, but the cool thing about coming out of 2020, going into 2021, other than the fact that we survived COVID, praise God, what would it be that could help us be better as people and as a country because we went through this year?
Well, besides Red and Black coming about in 2020.
Good job, Kara.
I don't know how this works for anybody else, but I will just say for me personally, 2020 had the one blessing of 2020 has been how well I've gotten to know my neighbors. In a lot of people who may not know about life in Orange County, we call it a garage door county. You go in the house, you close the garage door, and then everyone minds their own business. It's not a place that fosters like small town community atmosphere. There's a lot of people on my street that I just never knew. But because we were kind of trapped together here, we were our only support for the last 9 months. We've been forced to get to know each other for a little while when everyone was really serious. Now, no one on my block is very serious about this, by the way. They're all doing whatever they want. But when we didn't know what was going on, we spent a lot of time meeting in our front yards, pulling out fire pits, having a fire, letting the kids play, doing our social distancing, but hanging out. I got to know the people on my street in a way that I never knew them before. And it turns out that I have some really amazing neighbors. And I just had not had the motivation or the impetus to get to know them. And now these are people that if I need something, I know I can go to them. And that's something we didn't have before COVID. We were all so busy that had so much to do, sports events and classes and this, that, and the
And
other.
shows to go on where there's 12 million viewers.
Right, our 12 million viewer shows. But it's been a blessing to get to know the people around me. And I have not enjoyed life in the suburbs. I'm a city girl. This is kind of where we ended up. But this year, I've actually been grateful for suburban life. I have.
Jeff, what about you? What do you think is the big takeaway, the positive big takeaway from 2020 going into 2021 that we all can leverage moving forward that might or probably is being overlooked right now?
I think, and I've been seeing it especially over the past few weeks. And this really, it doesn't apply to the entire country. It really applies to conservatives. I think that a lot of people on the right are figuring out that the Republican Party doesn't always have its best interests at heart. We're seeing that even right now with these votes on these swine stimulus bills, that the Republican Party isn't who they said they were. It's the same type of position that we were in right before the Tea Party took off. But I think it's more pronounced now. And I'm seeing, just with a little bit I'm seeing right now, I'm seeing a pivot towards, let me just back that up. Kira, you mentioned that a lot of people on the right are angry. But my question is, who are they angry at? Of course they're angry at the left, but I'm seeing a lot of anger at the Republican Party. And it's not just because of the way they've treated Trump, or, there's a lot of people who are mad that they haven't stood up for him as much as they thought they should. But I just think in general, they're saying that the lawmakers in Congress who have an R next to their names aren't actual conservatives. And I'm seeing that people are becoming more aware of how our political system works. And we're going to be moving away from this thing where we just complain about the people in office, but then when primary season runs around, we don't show up. I think we're going to be showing up this time.
So
we'll be showing up.
Let's pivot to some things. Real quick answers. Ladies first. Worst politician in America in 2020. I know there's a lot of finalists this year. It was one hell of a competition for that title, but only one person can win. Kira, 30 seconds, who and why?
It was a toss-up between Newsom and Cuomo, but at the end of the day, I'm going with Cuomo because of the nursing home scandal, and also because he deigned to tell us what a sandwich is, and also because his brother is a hypocrite who had COVID and went out with COVID to his fancy mansion, maskless, and also because he had the nerve to write a book about the successes of his horrific COVID policy. So for me, it was a tight squeeze. It was a photo finish, but Andrew Cuomo wins by a hair. Andrew Cuomo, you are the worst politician in America, according to Kira Davis.
Jeff Charles, same question. Tight competition. We open up your envelope and we say, and the loser is, what's your name?
I have to do it this way because I can't just pick one. On the left, it's going to be Governor.
You got to pick one.
Jeff, I say you can pick two. It's okay. You can
All
pick
right.
two, baby.
Yeah, here's that I can pick two, so I can pick two. So on the left is Governor Gretchen Whitmer. When you are the type of person who prevents your residents from buying seeds to grow gardens, when you have locked them down, you are a horrible person, a horrible politician, and I really hope you get recalled. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, I can see why people would pick Cuomo and Newsom as well. On the right, Cocaine Mitch McConnell.
Oh, okay.
Especially lately.
I don't know what that guy's doing.
Wow. All right. So we talked about the worst politicians. We talked about the best stories. We're about to run out of time for 2020.
What's yours, Lenny? You don't have one?
The worst I mean, I'm biased. I'm a native Pittsburgher. I'm living in Pennsylvania. I'm a native Pennsylvanian. I think it's Tom Wolf. You can't shut down businesses and say, I'm going to be the only state in the country that has a waiver process for businesses. I'm not going to tell you how it works. I'm not going to tell the legislators how it works. My family business is going to initially be open, then I'm going to shut it down because it's embarrassing. And then literally say, I'm trying my best to be as transparent as possible, and then veto a bipartisan bill to restore transparency in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's a special gall. Special gall. And for somebody that said, I'm running as an outsider, I'm not really a politician, that's acting like one hell of a typical Pennsylvania politician. You do that. So mine's is obvious. What should we expect for 2021, ladies first?
More of the same for a little while, guys. Sorry. Sure would be nice if we had a miracle and didn't end up with Biden and Harris, but maybe we're all out of miracles for this year. But yeah, it's going to be a bumpy ride. And I don't know when it's going to even out. Wish I could tell you. Have no clue.
Jeff, 2021, what should we expect for 2021?
As a matter of fact, there won't even be a 2021 for the first 6 months. It's still going to be a continuation of 2020, like Kira said. So even when January 1st hit, we're still in 2020. And I think we'll be there for at least the first 6 months. Maybe something good will happen after that. I think the positive thing would be finally people get sick of the COVID restrictions and they force the government to go back to normal. But yeah, I think we're kind of stuck here for a little bit longer.
One final thing that's going to be a time capsule a little bit, because by the next episode, we'll have an answer. What does Georgia look like after the special election, Kira? Real quick.
Georgia, there's a couple of states, Georgia and Pennsylvania actually are probably about to see a reckoning in their voting. And if the Republican Party is smart enough, and I think they are, I think this will be one thing I'll say they are smart enough to do, is they're going to litigate these voting roll problems for the next few years up into the next presidential election. Because if they ever want to win another election, they're going to have to. So Georgia's going to look a lot different. In no matter what happens with the Senate race, honestly, I believe with my whole heart that voting in Georgia in 2024 is going to look a lot different than it did in 2020.
Interesting. Jeff, who do you think ends up winning? There's 2 U.S. Senate races. Do they both go blue? Do they both stay red? Do they split?
I'm actually pretty bullish on this. I think that the Republicans will keep the Senate. I think that both candidates will win. If one of them does lose, it'll be Purdue. I think Loeffler will win her race. But I think that the Republicans will have a very narrow hold on the Senate, which will be good because that will make it harder for Biden to push his agenda.
With that said, Kira Davis, can you tell us a little bit about the wonderful podcast you're working on as we wrap up 2020? Just got a few minutes left. Tell us what you're working on and what we can expect from you moving into 2021 before you act like, you don't know who we are and you go, new phone, who this, when I call you next.
Never. I would never forget my guys. No, it's been a pleasure to be with you all of you supporters and viewers out there through 2020. And here on Red and Black, we have big plans for the show. We believe that our voices are going to be more important than ever moving forward. So, of course, I'm staying right here with my 2 guys. We're going to keep pushing forward. Also, Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis is one of the fastest growing podcasts in news and politics on iTunes, which is a big deal. Very proud of that. So you can find that on iTunes or wherever. And then something fun that I've been doing for the holidays that maybe you want to enjoy me in is I have a Hallmark podcast. My friend Amelia Hamilton and Amelia has the Growing Patriots podcast, which is a fun little podcast for kids if you're looking for a historical podcast. We are Hallmark super fans. And so a couple times a week throughout the whole Christmas season, we've been watching movies together, breaking down the movies, breaking down all the cheese of it, all of the Hallmark cheesiness. We love it all. We're having a blast. We're about to wrap it up because we're going to wrap up for the new year. That'll be the end of season 1. So join us on A Very Merry Podcast. You can find that on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you find your podcast. That's A Very Merry Podcast with Kira Davis and Amelia Hamilton. Even if you don't like Hallmark movies, you're going to have fun listening to this show. I promise.
And Kara does a great job because Hallmark only has one plot. So it's amazing how creative she is, breaking down that one plot over and over and over again and making it interesting. But that takes talent. So thank you, Kira, and God bless you and Happy New Year. Jeff, what do you got coming up in 2021 real quick?
Yeah, as always, I have Breaking Conservatarian, my YouTube show, and audio-only podcast coming up soon as well. I'll be interviewing more guests. It's going to be great. And as I get better at learning banjo, I'll be posting videos of me struggling to learn the instrument. And I'm having a lot of fun learning it. I'm learning how to play Hurt by Nine Inch Nails. It's great.
Oh, I have a ukulele that I know how to play somewhat. Maybe we get a jam session.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
If the theme song to Red and Black changes in 2021, folks, you now know why.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I got that going on. Let's see. I think I'm going to be working on doing more audio-only podcasts. I've been meaning to start that for a while, but I haven't gotten started, but I will be getting started soon. But I'll still have my YouTube channel where I do my interviews. And like I said, I'm going to have some really interesting guests on. I already have some. If you check it out, Breaking Conservatarian, and it's going to be awesome.
You know, it's funny how they always talk about these wonderful people that the two of them talk to, and they've never invited me to do.
Never invite us. I've never been invited to Jeff's show, not one time.
You will. And Sarah invited me when she guest hosted. Jeff, before we go, she did invite me. You should at least invite her. I'm just saying, for me, 2021 is I'm going to get my co-hosts to actually invite each other on their other platforms so that they can spread the love, if you will, because as you well know, we have a lot of love here. We love the country. We love Red and Black. We love each other, and we love you. Happy New Year. Thank you for tuning in. We have big plans coming up for 2021, and we want you to be part of it with us. In the meanwhile, TCNGB, we love you. Take care and God bless.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.